Hello and welcome to the latest video in our series of lectures and analysis classes on the First Dáil and the War of Independence from 1919 to 1921. Now for today's video lesson we're going to look at what happened in the First Dáil and what were the main events of the War of Independence. So before we start, we have to understand the term Dáil. So the Dáil is the parliament set up in Dublin by the Sinn Féin TDs who refused to take their seats in Westminster, and we'll examine what impact that had on the rest of Irish history. Let's take a deep dive, shall we? So the First Dáil met on the 21st of January 1919, and they met in the Mansion House in Dublin. It declared Ireland a republic, and only 27 TDs at this time were present because many of them were in prison. In April, Eamon de Valera became the president, the head of government, and he appointed the following ministers. He appointed Arthur Griffith as vice president and minister for home affairs. He appointed Cathal Brugha as minister for defence. He appointed Michael Collins as the Minister for Finance, and, crucially here as a woman, he had Countess Markievicz as Minister for Labour. In June 1919, though, de Valera went to America to try to persuade the American government to recognise the Irish Republic. He failed, but managed to raise $4 million in the fight for independence. Now, on top of that, Griffith took control in de Valera's absence. Sinn Féin set up an alternative government in opposition to the British. Collins organised a loan of £350,000. This, together with the American money, paid for weapons and the costs of running the government. Sinn Féin courts were set up to replace British courts, and many local councils switched their support to the Dáil. Now, at the same time, the War of Independence is happening. On the exact same day, the 21st of January 1919, when the Dáil is meeting, the War of Independence begins in Soloheadbeg in County Tipperary. This was the same day that the First Dáil met. The two constables from the Royal Irish Constabulary, the RIC, were killed by a group of volunteers led by Dan Breen. The volunteers were by this time renamed the IRA, which stood for Irish Republican Army. The IRA attacked RIC barracks located in the countryside, and as a result, the RIC retreated to their towns, leaving the countryside under the control of the IRA. Michael Collins, as well as being Minister for Finance, was also the Director of Intelligence in the IRA. He had a network of spies throughout the country, including railwaymen and office clerks. He even had spies in Dublin Castle, the headquarters of the British administration in Ireland. Collins was the most wanted man in the empire. He also set up a group of assassins called the Squad. They murdered anyone who was a British spy. These murders were very effective in preventing the British from finding out the plans of the volunteers. Now, the IRA used guerrilla warfare against the British. This involved, Now, as well as these tactics, the IRA would use guerrilla warfare against the British. Guerrilla warfare is a type of fighting that consists of surprise attacks and ambushes. And as we saw in our earlier videos, the exact same tactic used by the Americans to defeat the British in the American War of Independence. So this involved ambushing British convoys and lorries and then disappearing into the countryside. As they didn't wear uniforms, they could hide among the ordinary civilian population. This made it very difficult for the British to capture them. Also, their knowledge of the local countryside meant they could disappear very quickly. You had local commanders such as Dan Breen, who we mentioned earlier in Tipperary, and Tom Barry in West Cork, who operated independently. And as the war got worse, the IRA formed flying columns. These were groups of full-time volunteers with 20 or more members who moved from place to place to help the local commanders set up ambushes. Now this changes when the Black and Tans come around. Due to the success of the IRA then, the RIC needed help. In the spring of 1920, former British soldiers were sent to Ireland. They were called the Black and Tans. Later, ex-army officers called the Auxiliaries were recruited. The Black and Tans in the Auxiliaries soon became very unpopular due to their ruthlessness. This increased support for the IRA among the ordinary people. The Black and Tans got their nickname from the fact that they wore army khaki trousers and RIC dark green jackets. Also, which increased their unpopularity, was their revenge attacks. Sometimes when a policeman was killed, the British forces hit back by terrorising the local people. Houses were burned, towns were smashed up, and prisoners were shot. This also increased support for the IRA. In December 1920, the Black and Tans burned Cork City. This was revenge for an IRA ambush near Cork. Now, as for the truce, people in Britain were embarrassed by the behaviour of their forces in Ireland. They were also tired after a long war during the Great War, i.e. World War I. Pressure was put on their government to end the war. The IRA at this time was also short of arms and members. A truce was agreed and it began on the 11th of July 1921. Now, what happens in this truce and ceasefire will lead to the Civil War and will lead to the division in Ireland as we know today. We'll look at that in our next video. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with another video again soon. Goodbye.